who are very interested in recruiting all of you. So this is a great thing. We have heard and we have responded to the fact that students really like hearing about career development topics from recruiters. And so that's what we do here at Prep with the Pro. So this is our first event of the quarter in the Prep with the Pro series, and it's going to cover resumes and cover letters. And the other two that are coming up in the next 2 weeks are, number one, we will have networking taking place on Tuesday, October the 15th from 11 to 12. And then the following week, we're going to be doing interviewing. And that's also going to be 11 to 12 on the 22nd of October, a Tuesday as well. So I'm actually going to add these links to the chat, and then you can register for them. We certainly want you all to attend. If I could find my cursor, I will do that. I'll do that in a second. Anyway, I want to make sure that you know that we're going to be taking questions throughout the presentation here, and we'll probably address them. If you have questions, put them in the chat, and we'll probably get to them as we're transitioning topics. And then we'll also wait at the end so we get through everybody's questions. We think that's, of course, very, very important. So one last thing before we start the presentation, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this place and all the land upon which the university and we as individuals are located. We pay our respects to the Native elders, past, present, and future, for they hold the memories, the traditions, and the culture of these areas, which have become a place of learning for people from all over the world. If you know whose Native community or community's land you are on, please reflect upon that and pay respect to them. If you don't, please take some time to do research, pay your respect, and share with people around you. So now it's my pleasure to be able to hand this presentation over to two UCSB alums who are wonderful recruiters from Cottage Health. We have Angela Mancuso and we have Joelle Morris, who are here to chat with you about resumes and cover letters. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the reins over to you, Joelle and Angeli. So do you want to take it over?
Great. Thanks so much for the introduction, Diana. And for students who are on, we love that you showed where you heard about this topic today in the chat. If you also wanted to just drop like what year you are in the chat and maybe what your major is, I'm just really curious to see the mix of students. And I know it's just going to fly through and then it's going to bury Diana's links there. So we are also recording this event. So Diana said that she was going to share this on the YouTube channel if you wanted to review it again in the coming weeks. So it is a serious mix. We've got fourth years to first years, math, linguistics. That's my major. Okay, let's get into our introductions. That really excited me to see that. So our very simple agenda today. The other thing, sorry, before we get on to the topic at hand, is just if you are in an appropriate place with a video and it doesn't mess with your bandwidth too much, it is always more engaging to see photos instead of names or videos instead of names. So if you want to come onto camera, please do so. And then we'll be taking questions and everything throughout where you can unmute yourself. But during the time where you're not speaking, if you can remember to be on mute. So now that the housekeeping's out of the way, just quick agenda here. We'll introduce ourselves and Cottage Health, where we both work. I'll be talking over resumes, then we'll have a brief pause if there's specific questions for resumes, and I'll hand it over to Joelle to do, to cover letters and resources, and then we'll have a giant Q&A session at the end, but we should have plenty of time to get to those questions. So briefly, my name is Angeli Mancuso. I graduated from UCSB in 2003. I moved to Santa Barbara from Northern California as an 18-year-old and went right on into undergrad. I graduated with sociocultural linguistics. I was really excited to hear recently that Matt Gordon is now the chair of that department. He was one of my favorite professors way back when. Since UCSB, I've gone on to nursing. So I have my registered nursing license, and I have a specialty in occupational health nursing. And then in 2016, went back to school for my master's in public health from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And then since the pandemic, have found myself in more of an administrative role instead of the patient care type world, and I'm the manager of workforce development here at Cottage Health. I'm going to turn it over to Joelle for a second so she can introduce herself.
All right. Hi, everybody. So I'm Joelle Morris. I'm the talent acquisition supervisor at Cottage Health. And you'll have to bear with me today. I'm a little under the weather, so sorry if I sneeze or sound a little gross. I'm very happy to be with all of you. So I'm also UCSB alum from 2012. I majored in political science. And I've had my career mostly in human resources since then, a lot of it in hospitality. Actually worked at a couple of hotels here in town, including the Hyatt and the Biltmore. Um, and then I started transition my human resources career over to healthcare, coming into Cottage Health about 2.5 years ago. So in my role, I work with a lot of onboarding, and I do a lot of recruiting for executive leadership roles, human resources positions, and help to lead the talent acquisition team. So I love doing this. It's one of my favorite things to do, is helping people get prepared for their positions. And then, as it shows on the screen, I actually just went back to school myself, starting a month ago at UCLA to get a master's in public health. So I feel a little bit more like I remember what it's like to be in your seat and have a lot on your plate. So I'm happy to help you out today.
Thanks, Joelle. And I always learn something new from Joelle when we do these presentations too. So she's got a wealth of knowledge from all of her years of recruiting in various industries. Just a little bit about Cottage Health and what our organization is. You've probably heard about us. We're your local hospital provider, but we're more than hospitals now. So we're the largest, or the third largest employer in Southern Santa Barbara County. UCSB and the city or the county are the other largest employers, and then there's Cottage Health. We have about 4,200 employees who make up about 1,000 unique job descriptions. So obviously there's a lot of people, a lot of folks in the same role, like our clinical nurse twos. There's a lot of people who fill that job description, but then there's people like me, the manager of workforce development. There's only one of me, there's only one job description. So 1,000 unique job descriptions with more than 125 years of service in the community. We started as a hospital system, so there are now 3 hospitals in that system: Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, Goleta Valley Cottage Hospital, and then our rural counterpart, San Ynez Valley Cottage Hospital. We also have a laboratory. If you guys are not on mute, go ahead and mute yourselves. Okay. We also have a laboratory system with patient service centers that go from Westlake Village all the way up to Templeton. And then we're growing in our ambulatory space, so clinic space. We've got 13 urgent care centers ranging from Port Hueneme to San Luis Obispo. And then we are growing in primary care and all of our specialty clinics. We now have an OBGYN clinic, a cardiology clinic, multiple pediatric clinics, all sorts of things in the ambulatory or outpatient space. And coming soon, we'll actually have an ambulatory or outpatient surgery center in Santa Maria. So lots of growth and job opportunities here within our organization. But here today, really just to talk to you about, even if you're not interested in healthcare, how can you get prepared for those internship applications, job applications, whatever you're ready for in your career. So what is the purpose of kind of resume and cover letter building, and where do you start? So in general, we're going to be reviewing the foundational knowledge of writing and tailoring resumes and cover letters for whatever your next step is. So the first thing to do is kind of think about, what are you ready for next? Is it an internship? Is it a job? Is it a volunteer position? Sometimes volunteering requires resumes and cover letters as well. Once you've identified what you're interested in, it's important to craft that targeted resume and cover letter. And then of course, step 3 is preparing. Once you get past the quote unquote paper cut, prepare for your interview. So Diana and her team at Career Services have a whole wealth of opportunities for you to learn and do all of those steps as you go through the Prep with the Pro series. So out of curiosity, anybody recognize this picture, or what is this referring to? You can throw it in the chat if you recognize the fairy tale that this kind of references. Did I pull a really esoteric? Goldilocks, Lucy, thank you. Yes. So Goldilocks, right? It's hitting that sweet spot. This bed is too hard. This bed is too soft. This bed is just right, right? So what I was trying to illustrate here is really that your resume and your cover letter, you're going to get a ton of advice about how to build both of those things. If you talk to me, I'm going to give you what I like to see. If you talk to Joelle, you're going to get what Joelle likes to see. If you talk to your the chair of your department, you're going to get that advice. Everybody is going to give you some kind of advice. And I think the overarching theme is that there is no one size fits all resume or cover letter. Format, what to include, what not to include, how long it should be, all of those things that we're going to talk about in general today. The main takeaway that I want to impart to all of you is that there is not a format that you have to follow, or that you should be following, or that you should be searching for, that golden format, right? What you really want to make sure of is that your resume and your cover letter, it's clear at a glance who you are and what you're going to bring to the role that you're looking for. So we're also going to talk a lot about customizing, right? And maybe like a master resume or a master cover letter, probably not so much a master cover letter, but a master resume, where then you can parse and kind of Frankenstein your customized. I'm applying to a position in a research department, so what education am I going to put over here? Versus I'm applying to a waitressing job, so what background am I going to put on the resume? Your resumes for those two experiences are going to be different, right? But the main goal is making sure that at a glance, the person that's reviewing it has an understanding of who you are as an individual and why you are good for the role that you're applying to. It's great to network with various people and institutions within the industry that you're looking for, because resumes going to med school are going to look different than resumes going on to that first job out of college or out of your undergrad. So with that overarching theme, now we'll get into sharing kind of details of what should be included. And we'll share a little bit of formatting, but again, just keep all of this in mind. There is no golden ticket for what it needs to look at. So I kind of talked about that global or master resume, a comprehensive resume that lists literally everything that you've ever done, all education that you've ever done, all volunteer work that you've ever done, all awards that you've ever been recognized with, right? This is going to be your working document that as you continue in your career and in your education, you keep adding to it. But it's really helpful to have, it's almost like your database in a format that works to cut and paste onto the shorter customized resumes that you're going to be creating for the jobs that you identify that you want. But it's a good just kind of like holding space for all of these things that then you will edit for that targeted and relevant resume. In general, your resumes are going to have 3 core sections. Make sure you have your contact information on there. This seems silly and like common sense, but I've seen a resume last week that didn't have someone's email address on it. And I'm sitting there going, well, how am I going to contact this person? Thankfully, she put her phone number, so I could contact her there. But make sure that any way that you want to be contacted is on that resume and you're not having your reviewer hunting for it. The next section is your education. And then the third section is your experience. And then we can talk about some like other sections that may come up depending on how much space you might have. As if you're applying for something specific, I mentioned this before, you want to tailor your resume to that specific position. So when we look at job postings, you're going to be looking at the job posting is probably going to include the things that they're looking for in the candidate. Like this example job posting for a recreation coordinator, they're looking for somebody with strong communication skills, strong customer service, attention to detail, a bachelor's degree in specific degrees, and then that experience in managing or coordinating recreational events. So you're then going to want to go back and look at your kind of comprehensive resume and say what experiences in here match these things, and you'll tailor that resume. Based on that job posting, think about the 3 core sections that we talked about. So we've got our address, city and state, maybe. There's some movement towards, leaving off very specific, maybe definitely leaving off your specific address. We might be able to touch on towards the end of this presentation a little bit about mitigating kind of unintended biases of reviewers and things like that. So we generally say, like, don't put your zip code, because sometimes, depending on where you're living, there may be something people think about that zip code versus another zip code. So city, state, region are a good spot to be, especially if it's something that you need to be on site for. The reviewer is going to want to know, does this person need to relocate for this job, or are they already planning on relocating? Did they already relocate? Things like that. Make sure that your email and your phone number is on there. And then an optional, kind of growing tendency is, your LinkedIn profile, or depending on the job that you're applying for, if it's something in the art world, or if it's something where you have a website that you can show, your portfolio, you would want to put that kind of information on your resume in the contact information section as well. In the education section, we're including things like institution, degree and major, expected graduation if you haven't already graduated. You're earlier in your career, so having that expected graduation date and even keeping your graduation date on for a while is okay. Again, with that unintended biases thing, sometimes as you're later in your career, we tell people to start taking the dates off, just so that it doesn't lend itself to saying, having people like make assessments or judgments of who you are or where you are in your career, depending on the date that you graduated. And then any relevant coursework. So one of the jobs that I recruit for is our new grad nursing program. And so I see a lot of very outlined, like this many hours in pediatrics and this many hours in critical care and the emergency room. And I see like very specific coursework. But if it's not relevant to the job, you don't need to put that on there. Sometimes it's just having the bachelor's or being in the middle of your bachelor's that's important. Mentioning things like your GPA can be helpful if it's something that is above, a certain level. So again, kind of, there's no right or wrong for it. You're going to have to think about what the job or the internship that you're applying for is and what they require. Med school is going to require it, right? And they're going to want to see a high GPA in there, or a balance of something else if you don't, an explanation of not having a high GPA. Then within your experience, things like the title of your position, the company and the location that that position was in, targeted bullet points to say, especially if it's a job title that maybe is only relevant to that company that you worked for, like give somebody a hint of what did you do, and then of course the dates of the experience that you had there. So this is a pretty like basic format. I think when I hand it over to Joelle, I'd also love to hear about her experience with applicant tracking systems, or ATSs. That's going to be an acronym that you guys see. There's this tendency now to go towards a resume that's very minimally formatted, that the computer essentially is going to screen for you and the computer can read, versus a person. If you can figure out when you're applying for an internship or a job, if they are using an AI or an ATS kind of system versus like the positions I applied for, it's all people. So I really do appreciate seeing formatted, pleasant to look at resumes as opposed to the things that maybe somebody is trying to kind of make sure you get through the system. But there's ways to do both of those things. So on here, we see that clear your name, city, state, phone number, email. If you had the LinkedIn or a website, you could put that on there too. Objective is kind of it's an optional statement. If you are going to include an objective, make sure that it is customized for the position you're applying for, and make sure that if it references a company, that you tailor it before you hit send. So I'm not going to say that I ever like deleted someone's resume because it said I'm applying for a new grad program at Dignity Health. But I definitely notice when somebody says I'm applying for the new grad program at Dignity Health and I'm working at Cottage, right? I'm going to notice something like that. And maybe I'm going to put it forward with a little bit of an asterisk to a hiring manager. But again, I'm not going to say like it's an automatic deletion, but you just want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success and not giving people the excuse to kind of say, and we're moving along, right? And then you can kind of see this, the format for education. And again, if you Google resume formats, you are going to get back thousands of different hits, right? So sometimes we've got two columns over here where we've got university, the location and the graduation date. Sometimes it's all left justified. Sometimes we have minors and majors listed. Sometimes we have GPA, and like you can see here, minors and cumulative. I mean, there's so much information about yourself that you can put on a resume. The key, and I'm going to keep coming back to this, the key is to make sure that the person reviewing it sees who you are and sees why you fit what they're looking for. Experience can come from so many places in your life, especially for those of you, maybe first year, second years, you know, who you maybe never had a job before. Maybe you didn't have to work through high school or in the summers, and that's okay. Figure out how you can still demonstrate experience on your resumes for time management or like customer service. Some of those like key things that entry-level positions are looking for, and the experiences that you've had maybe from babysitting or house sitting or something else that's gone on in your life that's unique that has given you some kind of a skill. Campus clubs and organizations, if you've developed skills from there or held leadership positions in those kinds of organizations, if you were active in sports, all of that teamwork and kind of working towards a common goal, all of those can really help boost a resume, even without you having had an actual quote unquote job. So think about how experience can be different than it doesn't just have to be a job. I actually coach some high school students on internship resume development. And as you can imagine, high school students really, this is literally their first opportunity to have something in the work environment. And so a lot of times we're putting things like if they were in charge of watching their younger siblings, what kind of skills did that help? If they were in charge of cooking dinner for their family, what kind of skills did that develop, and how we can put that on a resume. You as college students probably have more than that, and we can like work through details of what types of things that happens, but even things like class projects and how you can talk about working as a group on a class project or something. Then again, within the experience, you're gonna detail to the extent necessary for the job is how I'm gonna say this, right? So it depends on what you are applying for. It also depends on, is the job title, does the job title tell the person who's reading enough about the position, or do we need to have like this first one here, 5 bullet points? you're going to want to work through some of those different kinds of questions as you're tailoring your resume for the job that you're looking for. And then again, how to write about your experiences. You know, we're talking about putting all of your information, like this example is going off of the original example that I shared about the sports coordinator, and you need to like show, this person needs to show something about sports management. And so they're really using language like working with a team, coordinating. Remember that section of the job posting that said, we want somebody with strong communication, customer service skills. This, who created this resume literally took that language from the job posting and plunked it into their resume, which is a smart way to do it, right? And make sure you're being honest with it, right? So if you don't have these strong skills, how can you still demonstrate that you would be good for the job and that you would fit these kind of minimum qualifications? Make sure that on your resume, you're summarizing the content, summarizing pieces from your resume, summarizing pieces from that comprehensive, and try to take ownerships of the skills and the tasks that you performed. A lot of times, as you're earlier in your career, you know, you may not have led a team, but how, maybe talk about what pieces of the team you were able to lead, so that it's not, you're not talking about like, I was a part of this team, but what did you do to kind of raise the team up? And how can you demonstrate that experience on this piece of paper, right? This is the first step in the job hunt. And so you want to make sure that you are clearly communicating the story about what you can bring to the next opportunity. Make sure that you talk about things and really take that ownership of projects or activities that you did in previous projects, previous jobs, previous experiences, and use action words, verbs that really talk about how you reached an outcome. One of the other things that I talk about with like our summer interns when they're building their resume to move on from our internship is put in data, right? We had an intern recoup $200,000 of lost revenue over the summer. That number is significant. That's going to speak volumes to somebody when they're reviewing their resume, especially when they see it under the title of intern, because sometimes people think, oh, intern, you know, what actual like work did you do? Well, in my internship, I recouped $200,000 in 10 weeks. Like, that's great. Brag about that, put that on the resume, and make sure that you then have the story to back it up when somebody asks you about it. Another section, so we've gone over the three main sections that are must-haves for your resumes, but we also can see sections on skills or kind of the things that maybe you didn't have an opportunity to highlight in a specific experience, or especially if you don't have a lot of employed experience and you just need to be able to share with the reviewer of this resume that you are proficient in the Microsoft suite, or you speak multiple languages, or you know, there might be reasons that you would need to put on if you can travel under different passports, or if you have citizenship in different places. If you're in the lab or research environment, make sure that you've got, if you are doing a skills section, kind of outline those specific skills, especially if it relates to the job that you're applying for, right? If you're not applying for a lab job, maybe the technical lab skills aren't important. So just kind of think about all of those pieces. Other sections that I've seen on resumes that kind of jump out to me are, sometimes I see experience broken into two sections. We've got paid experience and then volunteer experience, because sometimes those are two very different worlds. Sometimes I've seen them mixed, and then within the experience section, someone will just call out, this was a volunteer role, this was an employed role. But if you're doing a chronological resume, maybe they go in that chronology. And then the other section that I've seen are kind of if you are published, if you have been given any, types of awards and recognition within your student groups or prior employment, you can have sections on that as well. Another kind of piece within this customization, you're going to get feedback from some people of like, you have so much white space, like let's fill it up. And then if somebody else is going to tell you, oh my gosh, it's so cluttered and I can't read it, so get rid of a lot of these words, right? So again, it comes down to how are you portraying your experience and what's the job required for you? So if we pull it all together here, this is the resume that Pat Gaucho put together for that recreation center position. So we've got our clear how to get a hold of me, that optional objective section, the education, the recreational programming experience. So kind of notice that this person has broken their experience into two different things, right? Specific to recreational programming, because that's the job that you're applying for. But then also, I'm going to put in my leadership experience because I know from the job posting that this position, the person hiring for this position is looking for someone with some leadership experience. So there's how the customization came in. Pay attention to things like spelling, grammar, the overall layout, the format, the verb tense. One of the things, whether it's a position you're still in, you maybe use present tense. A position that you did in the past, make sure it's all past tense. Spelling and grammar, again, I'm never going to say I threw out someone's resume because I found one word spelled wrong. But this is a document that you should have spent a lot of time on. And also I recognize when you spend a lot of time on a document, you become kind of blind to things like spelling and grammar. So give it to a friend, right? Even somebody who doesn't even know anything about what you've done or about the job you're applying for, somebody who's literally just looking at spelling and grammar kind of stuff, just to do that copy editing for you. I see a question in the chat about should we highlight these keywords throughout our resume like this one did? I'm going to say no. I would prefer not to have them highlighted. But again, it does make it really clear, right, that you are tying it to the job posting. But I think in general, I've never seen something so highlighted like this. So I would say no. I'm kind of going to open it to Joelle to see if she disagrees with me. But again, we're going to get into this like, it depends, and it's your document, right?
Yeah, I would say not to. I think that if there's something you wanted to emphasize, like the bolded is probably sufficient. I think it just makes it look a little bit cluttered, and also you want to kind of let the reader keep an open mind. Like you may think that these are the important things, but there may be other things that they think are important as they look at it. So I just wouldn't be quite so specific, but it's a really good question. I can see, why you might ask that, but I think this was just trying to for us to show, what we are highlighting.
Right. Yeah, really good question. And we are at the end of the resume section. So if there are specific questions about resumes, happy to take them now, or we can turn it over to Joelle. She'll go over cover letters and we can cover everything at the end as well. So just if there's any burning questions about resumes. Okay, I'm going to continue. Oh, wait, see, I knew it. What do you think about including a picture of ourselves on resumes? Such a great question. Okay, so here's that unintended bias again, right? I've seen pictures coming back. Like 10 years ago, it would have been a hands down, absolutely no, do not put a picture on your resume. There's also certain industries where picture is really important. For whatever reason, real estate still requires pictures. If you're in the performing arts, a picture is, you're probably even actually going to have to give them a headshot if you're in some kind of performing arts. But I've started seeing them coming back on nursing resumes, photos. my preference is not to see it. I want to be able to see a piece of paper and not, even with all of my training and experience and being able to say, I am not going to be biased looking at this resume. Pictures still do something different for people. So I prefer that a photo isn't on a resume. Joelle, do you have anything else?
I would just say I don't think it's a deal breaker for anybody. So I would just say if you want to have it and you have a professional one, I think it's fine. But I certainly don't think it's needed except for maybe in some. It doesn't bother me, and you're right, Angeli, I see it more now. But I would just be sure that it's a professional looking one if you're going to do it.
Right. Yes, that's a really good point.
We have a few
Putting
other
high school, putting high school on your resume, I think is important for where you are in your career right now. As soon as you graduate from college, I would say you can probably move on from the high school piece. You've also by that time probably developed a lot more experience and things that are going to take up more space on your resume, and you're going to be looking for things to cut. So by all means, you know, that's one of the first things to cut as you build your experience. On your resume, if you've had internships but never paid jobs, I would still put your internships, because those are still great experience. And again, volunteer work as well. You build job skills from every experience that you're having, whether it's an internship, a volunteer experience, especially if you're in a leadership role within that volunteer experience. So by all means, put that on there. And then you don't necessarily have to call it out as saying like unpaid, or you don't have to write anywhere on there saying, I've never been paid for my work. You know, you'll just have a heading that says internships, and you can list those, and then volunteer experience, and you can list those, but it'll look crisp and clean and still provide that information. Let's see, CV versus resumes. That's a good question.
I think, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Joelle.
I think the difference is just CVs are used for education and science related positions. So anything where you might have like publications or have research to demonstrate. That's my understanding. So then it would be more detailed. So I think unless you're going into those types of roles and have something more detailed like that to share, then I think a resume is fine. I don't know if you have more detail on that, Angeli. Sorry, I saw you.
No, yeah, that's about what I was going to say too. I see CVs a lot more with folks who have, you know, decades of experience, or if you're early in your career, but like you said, you're trying to get into like academia, positions within academia or research, because then you're going to have sections on not just education, your work experience, but also your publications, your speaking events, you know, those kinds of details that you're going to need to list out and take up more space on your CV than on your resume. And then it's not just present tense for verbs only. Although you said for jobs you currently have. That's how I prefer it. If you're still working in the role that you're describing on this piece of paper, I would put it in present tense, but I don't think anybody's going to call you out on like, why is this in past tense? So if you wanted your whole resume to just read past tense, I think that's okay too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think your current role could be present and then the other one's past, or all of them in past. I think either one is fine. Those are good questions. Any other questions?
Right. Yeah, those are really good. All right, let's get into cover letters.
Talk about the scary cover letter. So I think I call it scary just because I think that's something people really struggle with, mostly because it's hard to understand the purpose of the cover letter, because it feels like you wrote out this resume, you spent all this time on this, maybe they're going to meet me, maybe they aren't. What's this kind of third piece? And similar to resumes, I think, it looks different for everybody. As HR professionals, it's kind of like a silly debate that is always had of, do you look at them? Do you not? Do they matter? Do they not? It's just something everybody has a different opinion about. So it's safe to just have one, and make sure that you use it just in case there's somebody who really, really likes to see them. I will say that I think what I notice is that the manager for the position tends to like it more. So of the people if you make it through to the interview process, there will probably be somebody that likes to see it. Um, but I think the recruiter, kind of the first pass, probably doesn't read it. In which case I would say, or because of that, I would say actually the spot that Angeli was talking about for the objective on the resume, what I would try to do is find maybe like a 2-sentence recap that you can do of your cover letter for the objective. So to me, it's like when I look at the objective on a resume and when I'm writing it on my own, I'm trying to think about, if somebody doesn't bother with my cover letter, what is it that I'm trying to portray? And let me put this in the objective. Because as the first person looking at your application, that's typically what I would look at to understand, why are you applying? And I don't think I'm alone on that. My understanding is I think a lot of recruiters do that. So that's just one note on that. So I think that really the job description is telling you what skills and experience an employer is looking for. And that's kind of where you want to start. This cover letter is really the direct connection between your resume and the position you're applying to. So you want to make sure that it's tailored to that position. You can kind of do something similar with having like a master cover letter. That's what I've usually done. But you're going to edit it more than you would edit the resume to tailor it to the position. So the resume really showcases the skills and experience that you're offering the employer, and then the cover letter is really the opportunity to connect those two. So um, if you're applying to different roles like accounting, software development, you want to really speak to the experience that is related to that position. So you want to really comb that job description and understand what they're looking for. I would say as far as length goes, that I think 3/4 to 1 page long is at most. Again, people just don't have that much time to read, so you want to make it kind of snappy. So I'd say even just 2 small paragraphs, the one that's on the screen is a good one to show. And then because it's coming with your resume, you really don't need to re-summarize your resume. This should be showing them something different. And the last thing I would say before we move forward on here is that I think explaining to the person, like when I thought about when I'm tailoring my resume, I'm trying to look at, or my cover letter, I'm looking at what are the skills, what is the link that I want to make for the employer between the resume and the job? Like, why does my resume set me up to be a good candidate for this job? It's almost like if you had your resume, you submitted it, and then you ran into this person in the elevator, what would you say to them kind of quickly? And so with that, I think making the connection of that specific organization, like why Cottage versus Dignity? What is it about us? I think that's something that people want to see. And then again, if you have a contact, somebody that you know there, like that gives you a specific reason why you want to apply there, you can reference that as well. So then I think with the structure, you can see the traditional cover letter here. I'm going to show another one that's a little bit more what I would probably suggest personally, but just keep in mind with everything that different preferences, having it be neat, clean, to the point is what matters. But here you just have at the top of the page, same contact information from the resume, so they look consistent. The date that you're sending it, along with the contact information for the employer, including the person you're sending it to. I know this is always kind of a sticking point. I think it's not critical to get a name of somebody. It's not as hard as it used to be to get the name of who the hiring manager is now as it was. So if you can take the time and try to find that, I think that, is always kind of impressive. Even if you get it wrong, it's great to look like you tried. It's pretty easy to do on LinkedIn, and probably in the networking, they'll get into this a little bit more, but just finding the organization, looking for the manager of the department, even just calling is so easy on their website. Between those three, you can probably find the name. But if not, I would say Dear Hiring Manager or Dear Hiring Committee is a great way to start it. And just always think that to whom it may concern just sounds a little blanketed and impersonal. So I would avoid using that. Um, so I think 3 to 4 paragraphs at most, similar structure to, an essay that you might write, like an introduction, body, conclusion. In the introduction, you can begin by discussing why you're interested in this particular role, like tying those experiences, tying what's in the resume, the skills and experiences to the position is really helpful. That's really what you want to do there. I think one point, something that I see a lot, even from people that have been working for a long time, people that have applied to a lot of jobs, is saying what it is that you would gain from the role and forgetting to talk about what you have to offer. I think you want to do both. I try to always say something like that, and I'm always looking for that, because you don't want to just hear what the person thinks that they're going to offer. You want to know that they're really going to be there and they're going to be a great employee because they also see what it's going to provide to them. So it should be both. So I would be sure to hit on both of those. And then lastly, as far as tying the experience and the skills, I think the specific examples, especially when you don't have a lot of work experience, I think this is really kind of your moment to shine. If one of the things you put on there because you didn't have work experience is team captain of your tennis team, something like that, you can draw on a specific example of something, maybe challenging or something that was related to the work that you're trying to do. If you're trying to be a recruiter, for example, saying something like, we had a really small team and I needed to do my own recruiting. Actually, the director of my team, my boss, she started out in recruiting because she had to recruit members to build a track team in her college. And that's how she got started. So don't discount those things. And this is kind of the moment to draw those connections for the reader. So then lastly, in the conclusion, I would say just summarizing the letter, thanking them is really important for reading. A common sentence is something like, thank you for your time. I look forward to meeting with you soon. I think kind of pushing that confidence of I'm looking forward to meeting with you. Something that sounds like you though. And then just signing it with your name, and you can do that in whatever font you'd like. Let's see here. Sorry. And then, oh, sorry, there's a question here. How should we address the cover letter? Oh, we already went through that. Okay. But let me know at the end if you still have questions on that. So the bullet point style here, I like this. I think, like I said a few times, people just don't have a lot of time. This is just so much easier to look at than the letter. But you have to keep in mind the audience with all of this. When we talk about tailoring, you just want to look at the overall picture. If you're submitting a job to be, let's say, a content writer, you might want to have something that looks a bit more formal and like a letter, but I think that this is just really clear. So that's something I would recommend if it makes sense to you. And then let's see here. I think I would just, just give you a few takeaways here. And Angeli, feel free to jump in here, but I think both, we've said it a few times about tailoring, and I know that's kind of frustrating because it's like all we want is just have a resume and a cover letter and just bada bing, bada boom. And I'm sure that's what some of our parents had, was they walked around with 20 copies of their resume and dropped it off. But unfortunately, it's really is expected to have something a bit more tailored. I would absolutely save copies of both that are tailored together for specific types of jobs that you're applying to, and just go through and update them. I try to constantly, whenever I complete something, like you finish school, you finish a job, you finish an internship, go into the resume cover letter, throw it in there, because it's really hard when you've got this job you're so excited about, or you met somebody and they're like, oh, can you send me your resume tonight? And I know I've said that to people multiple times. And then there you are like, oh my gosh, what did I do in that job? And then you're going to rush and it's not going to look as good. You won't feel good about it. So if you can just keep this as a living document, I think that's really important. The strong action verbs, when I first build a resume cover letter, it might sound a little direct and maybe plain, and then I kind of go back in and zhuzh it up, as Angeli would say, and just kind of throw in the more impactful words, which I know you all know how to search for those. And then getting feedback, I think that's really, really important, not just for the grammatical and the spell check, which is incredibly important, but just a second set of eyes is really great. If you have a mentor or somebody that you can fly this to and just have them, give a little bit of feedback, I think that's really important as well. And then lastly, I think the last slide about using your resources. So great resources at UCSB, like Angeli and I both know. I know I took advantage of it when I was there. This is really like part of what you're at a great school for. So definitely take advantage. And then LinkedIn has really great resources. Just searching anything, it's really, really professional and there's a lot on there. And then, like I mentioned, mentorship, networking kind of go together. I think having a couple of people that you rely on, maybe even one in each type of industry you're interested in, that you can talk to about your resume cover letter, I think is really, really helpful. So I think that that's all I wanted to cover. And I don't know if there was a couple questions maybe in here. Applying for any healthcare position, would we write the cover letter in paragraph form or bulleted form in terms of highlighting our experience and skills? Angeli might have a better idea about this. I would think bulleted, and in my head, a lot of people in healthcare are, kind of, they want to be direct and to the point and they're kind of moving quickly. So in my mind, that makes sense. But again, it's going to be different for everybody. So I don't know if you have a thought on that, Angeli.
My brain works in bullets and outline form, so that's just how I prefer to write. It's how I prefer to read. But again, that's definitely one of those pieces of like, you will hear 50 different answers for 50 different people that you ask for what they like. I was also going to mention, the positions that I have hired for in the past, I want to be, it requires a lot of like written communication. So if I don't get a cover letter, I will usually ask that as a follow-up. Like if the recruiter shares the resume and says, hey, this person has the experience, I'll usually reach out to the candidate and say, I really liked your resume. Can you write me a cover letter? Like I'll reach out to ask that so that I can see the writing style and see it. Again, because of the jobs that I had hired for in the past, like the clinical jobs that I've hired for in the past, probably I don't need to worry about that so much because like nursing school makes you a terrible writer. But but the positions that I did need people to be able to email summaries to executive level people, like I'm going to request a cover letter or some kind of a writing sample in that interview process if you don't give it to me up front.
And it looks like Diana answered the other question. It's a good question. Is there any other questions for us?
I have a direct message in mind. So you notice good attention to detail, the person who messaged me. My email address does not have the O on my last name. So just notice that. It's a1mancuso@sbch. So excellent attention to detail. But that is what you see on the screen there is my email address. And Joelle and I include our email addresses on here because we do want to be resources for you. So if you have follow-up questions, certainly ask Diana. You're welcome to email us. Yeah.
And I just put a little note on there so you could copy it. There must have been a lot of
my attention to detail.
I don't know why I have a 6, but I do.
Okay, I'm gonna fix that really fast. Hang on one second.
You guys are great. So students, if questions about this resume or cover letter thing that we all have to do, we've got great people here interested in sharing with you, UCSB alums. So ask away. And I also wanted to give a plug for Cottage Health because they are one of our Alliance program members. So they are highly, highly supportive of career services at UCSB, and are certainly committed to hiring you students and helping you in your professional development. So be sure and ask some questions before we say goodbye to Angeli and Joelle.
Yeah, and feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or email. And even if you're not interested in healthcare or Cottage, like we're happy to help you with your resumes, cover letters, or whatever you need. Oh, sorry, you have a hand up. I think Lucy, go ahead.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for giving us this presentation. I think it helps a lot. So I was wondering kind of about the point where you were saying that like having quantity of impact is really important to show on a resume. So I guess the situation I'm curious about is like if I did some sort of contract creative for somebody and then earned a certain amount, also got a certain donated to a program for that, like do you think that would be something impactful to include? Because I know that for most you don't really put like any monetary amount.
I'm going to personally say it depends on the job that you're applying for. So if you're applying for a job in fundraising or advancement or something like that, and you have a significant amount of donations raised, if you ran the Alzheimer's walk at UCSB or something, and so you had 500 participants and raised over $100,000, like certainly put something like that kind of data on your resume. Other like key data set numbers that I put on for mine now that I'm in a management role is I will say, I've led teams from 1 to 70 and the makeup of those teams. So I've been the direct supervisor for physicians, nurses, entry level, administrative personnel, so there's data like that around. If somebody were to come to me and say, okay, I see that she has 10 years of management experience, but then in the interview, it becomes clear, like she's led a team of 2 for 10 years. That's very different than leading a team of 70. Or similarly, if you're going for that advancement position or fundraising position and your experience is that you raised, $500 is different than $500,000. So, and similar to your GPA, you're only going to put the data on there that does speak volumes for what you're trying to go for, right?
So it comes down to like if it helps you and if it's relevant to what you want to do.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Alexander, you've got your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so my question was, say you're applying for an engineering position or an applied physics position in industry, would it be appropriate to include a maker portfolio on your resume if you have say experience building and inventing things either with other students in the system or by yourself? Would that be something that would be appropriate to include in your resume?
You're cutting in and out, but what I think I heard was you've got engineering experience and you've invented some things either alone or with a team, and you want to know if you should include that kind of a portfolio in your application.
That's right, like include it under a maker portfolio and link it on your resume, kind of like linking your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have other places besides, LinkedIn just seems to be the most accessible, easy spot for people to kind of create a website that shows some information about them. But if you have, like I'd mentioned, if you have an art portfolio that's online or a website, or you've done services, or like you've got inventions, or you have these projects, absolutely include those on there for people to see.
Gotcha, thank you.
You're welcome. And then there's another question in the chat. Is this advice relevant for graduate schools or just jobs? I personally think it's relevant for both. I think grad school is going to be a different type of tailoring. Joelle, you just came off mute too.
Oh, I was just going to say the exact same thing. Yeah, I would almost treat it just like another tailoring. Um, Instead of looking at the job description, you're looking at what the program is and tailoring to that. And maybe like with the CV, what we were talking about, the CVs of if it's something like if you're applying to a PhD or maybe something with research and there's anything relevant that you have there. But I can't think of anything that I would say doesn't apply because of grad school. I don't know if you can, Angeli.
Mm-mm. You know, I think I'm most familiar with things like med school or PA school. I've helped students with those types of applications, and they are much more prescriptive as far as what they want from you and what they expect you, like formatting and all of that. So my best advice for that would be to network with admission counselors or people who've just gone through applying to med school. Like try to get the specifics for that type. And this goes for any industry, right? Network with the people in the industry to understand what that industry is looking for. I think healthcare and hospitality and things like that is much more like, we want to see your, there's not a prescriptive format to follow, I guess is the bottom line for that. But there are some programs in some industries that are you must have it in this amount of space and you must include these bullets and you must, even for the people who've asked me to write a letter of recommendation for med school for them, I can't stand it because it's like, don't tell me what to write about this person. I want to tell you why this person is great, but the med school requires me to hit all these points.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I did just go through it. And there was somebody, I forget how I found them, but they were easy to find that I just reached out to and asked for any guidance or tips or anywhere that they could point me in the right direction, even though I do this for a living with my resume and cover letter. And they actually let me send it to them. And then they kind of highlighted for me the things that were going to be looked at more closely and then the things that wouldn't really matter. And they just gave me all kinds of pointers. So I think what I found with grad schools, people really want to help you. I think that's kind of across the board. So just take advantage of your resources. Don't be shy.
Well, we are at time, a little beyond time, and to respect your time, I think we should probably wrap. But gosh, we appreciate you all so much, Joelle and Angeli.